A nuanced assumption is present in modern society that links luxury to ownership. The more expansive the residence, the longer the inventory of belongings, the greater the perceived freedom. However, numerous individuals who have amassed more than previous generations ever envisioned still characterize their lives with the same descriptors: busy, complicated, and unexpectedly restricted. The essential question may not be what do we own, but instead, what can we readily access? The dialogue today delves into an alternative perspective on luxury, one that redirects our focus from ownership to opportunity. There are instances when access is far more significant than possession. Access to knowledge without enduring years of searching, access to meaningful connections without the need for extensive networking, access to stunning locations without the necessity of ownership, access to tranquility when the world becomes overwhelming, access to health, creativity, trust, and time. The contemporary world has subtly broadened access in remarkable ways. We can opt to borrow instead of purchase, subscribe instead of hoard, and collaborate instead of dominate. Yet psychologically, many of us still act as if security is derived solely from ownership. We persist in accumulating, not always out of necessity, but because possession provides a sense of certainty. Thus, perhaps today's discourse is not merely about transportation, technology, or economics. It is centered on a more profound human instinct, our yearning to feel that life is within our reach. What transformations occur when we cease to evaluate wealth by the quantity of items we can retain, and instead assess it by the quality of experiences we can attain? Could it be that the lightest existence is sometimes the most abundant one? To investigate this notion, I am accompanied by an individual whose work consistently prompts us to reevaluate familiar beliefs. Instead of urging us to gather another framework or ambition, they inspire us to examine more closely the unseen structure of daily life, where freedom often hinges less on ownership and more on openness. I am eager to discover the direction this conversation will take. For an extended period, societies have linked luxury to ownership. We inherently admire individuals who possess more real estate, more automobiles, more collections, and more tangible indicators of stability. However, we currently inhabit a world where numerous valuable experiences do not necessitate ownership. We can acquire knowledge without the need for personal libraries, enjoy transportation without owning several vehicles, collaborate internationally without the requirement of a shared office, and engage with culture without the need to physically collect it. In spite of this transformation, our psychological tendencies still appear to be connected to accumulation. Why do you believe that ownership continues to provide a greater emotional comfort than mere access? Is this merely a custom passed down from earlier generations, or does it uncover something more profound regarding the human desire for certainty, identity, and security in an ever-changing world?
I believe that the concept of ownership gained emotional significance long before it acquired economic importance. Throughout much of human history, survival hinged on what one could manage. Possessing land, food, or tools was not merely a status symbol. It served as a safeguard against unpredictability. Although our surroundings have evolved significantly, our psychological makeup still retains remnants of that earlier existence. What is particularly intriguing today is that uncertainty has not vanished. It has simply transformed. Rather than fearing poor harvests, we now fear becoming irrelevant, facing instability, or missing out on opportunities. Ownership appears as a symbolic answer to these issues. We often convince ourselves that if something is permanently ours, a portion of our future appears more certain. However, access encourages us to cultivate a different relationship with life. It implies that value does not necessarily need to be held in our possession to enhance our lives. A public library, a dependable community, a collaborative workspace, or an efficient transportation system can all foster abundance without requiring ownership. The more profound inquiry is whether we are in pursuit of objects or reassurance. Many of our belongings serve as emotional substitutes for certainty. Once we acknowledge this, we start to question whether certainty is genuinely established through the accumulation of possessions or by existing in an environment where meaningful access is reliable. This transformation not only influences our purchasing choices, but also reshapes our comprehension of freedom itself.
When individuals encounter the term luxury, they frequently envision exclusivity, the capacity to own something that is rare among the masses. However, the concept of access presents a contrasting philosophy. It implies that value may arise from fluidity rather than stability, and from availability rather than accumulation. This perspective, in many respects, challenges the prevailing cultural narrative that equates success with what we retain. Do you believe that our connection to ownership has influenced our understanding of identity? If that is the case, what could occur to our self-perception if we gradually adapted to constructing our lives around meaningful access rather than enduring possession?
Identity is frequently constructed from what is visible. Possessions are tangible, quantifiable, and socially acknowledged, making them easily integrated into the narrative we create about ourselves. Unbeknownst to us, we may start to conflate stewardship with identity, assuming that our surroundings dictate who we are. A lifestyle focused on access raises a deeper question. Who are you when there is nothing to affirm your value? Initially, this may feel unsettling, as ownership provides psychological stability. It enables us to identify something and assert, "This belongs to me." In contrast, access redirects the focus from ownership to engagement. Rather than inquiring about what we possess, it prompts us to consider how deeply we interact with the opportunities life presents. Interestingly, this often leads to a more liberated sense of identity. There is diminished pressure to uphold appearances, justify possessions, or incessantly seek to acquire more. The energy previously devoted to managing belongings can now be redirected towards learning, nurturing relationships, fostering creativity, and being present. I do not suggest that ownership loses its significance. Certain items merit permanence as they contribute to stability and a sense of belonging. However, when ownership becomes our primary metric of value, we risk neglecting a more profound form of wealth: the assurance that, regardless of what life demands next, we can access it meaningfully. Perhaps this represents the subtle transformation of luxury in contemporary society, not possessing everything within our grasp, but rather living in a manner that ensures what truly matters remains authentically accessible.
I aspire to transition from conceptual ideas to tangible experiences. Numerous individuals dedicate years to the pursuit of ownership, genuinely believing it will enhance their sense of freedom. They exert greater effort, gather more possessions, and gradually construct lives laden with responsibilities linked to those assets. However, upon achieving several of these milestones, they occasionally realize that their external gains have also imposed unseen obligations internally. An increase in assets necessitates more upkeep. A rise in commitments demands additional focus. The accumulation of ownership can subtly diminish flexibility instead of enhancing it. Based on your observations, what trends have you identified among individuals who start to question the connection between ownership and freedom? Is there a specific moment or insight that frequently leads someone to perceive access, rather than accumulation, as the more liberating approach to life?
A recurring theme emerges consistently. The journey of realization seldom starts with the acquisition of something novel. Instead, it commences when individuals become aware of how much of their focus is already consumed by their possessions. I have encountered individuals who have reached numerous aspirations they once envisioned, yet their discussions gradually evolved. They began to speak less about obtaining and more about preserving. Their schedules became dominated by management tasks rather than enriching experiences. Their belongings were not merely background elements, they were persistently demanding their time, choices, and emotional resources. The pivotal moment often occurs during an unexpectedly mundane experience. Someone opts to borrow rather than purchase and discovers that nothing significant was forfeited. They travel with minimal baggage, and find themselves feeling more engaged. They prioritize convenience over ownership and come to understand that the experience holds far greater value than the act of owning itself. This realization does not lead to a dismissal of ownership. Rather, it fosters discernment. Individuals start to inquire, does this item enhance my life, or do I possess it because I believed success necessitated it? This inquiry transforms everything. Ownership shifts from being a default response to a deliberate choice. Freedom is redefined, no longer gauged by the quantity of possessions amassed, but by the minimal unnecessary burdens carried through each day.
A notable aspect of this discussion is that access appears to foster a distinct relationship with trust. Ownership often conveys the sentiment, I do not need to rely on anyone else. In contrast, access relies on the effective functioning of systems, communities, infrastructure, and relationships, allowing us to avoid the necessity of possessing everything ourselves. This seems to necessitate a greater level of confidence, not only in society, but also in our own capacity to adapt. Do you believe that one of the most significant misconceptions regarding this concept is that individuals equate independence with isolation? What insights have you gained about the connection between true freedom, healthy interdependence, and the preference for access over possession?
I believe we have mistaken independence for total self-sufficiency. There exists a subtle notion that requiring less from others equates to greater strength. However, human flourishing has never thrived in isolation. It has consistently relied on trusted relationships and shared systems. Access highlights that wealth is not merely a personal issue, it is also a communal one. A city that boasts excellent public spaces, dependable transportation, accessible knowledge, and robust communities enables individuals to lead fulfilling lives without the necessity of personally owning every solution to every problem. The misconception lies in equating dependence with weakness. Healthy interdependence is a different concept. It does not entail relinquishing responsibility. Rather, it acknowledges that no meaningful life can be constructed in solitude. Ironically, those who appear most at ease often possess fewer unnecessary possessions, but enjoy deeper access to trusted individuals, welcoming places, stimulating ideas, and communities where generosity flows effortlessly. Such access fosters resilience. When one avenue closes, another frequently opens, as relationships, rather than material possessions, form the bedrock of security. Perhaps true liberty is not about completely distancing ourselves from others. It is about cultivating enough trust, adaptability, and openness so that life remains accessible without the overwhelming burden of having to own everything ourselves.
As we delve into this concept, it becomes evident that access transcends mere economic implications. It embodies a psychological approach to life. It alters our definitions of security, influences our relationship with uncertainty, and even shapes our perception of daily freedom. I would like to reconnect this to the notion of intangible luxury, which is central to our discussion. In a society that frequently glorifies tangible ownership, what makes a life structured around intentional access feel subtly luxurious? What internal transformations occur when an individual starts to prioritize openness over accumulation, availability over ownership, and experiences over lasting control? Why does this transition foster a sense of expansiveness that many individuals articulate yet find challenging to articulate?
I believe that spaciousness emerges when unnecessary responsibilities are relinquished. At its essence, true luxury has never solely revolved around accumulation. It fundamentally concerns experiencing life with less friction. By structuring our lives around intentional access, we begin to eliminate the unseen layers of mental management. This results in fewer distractions vying for our attention, fewer belongings that require justification, and fewer choices focused on upkeep rather than significance. This transformation cultivates a quiet yet significant sense of peace. Our focus shifts back to the present moment, rather than being preoccupied with managing life's inventory. Interestingly, this newfound spaciousness is not devoid of content. It opens up avenues for dialogue, curiosity, relationships, creativity, rest, and introspection. Rather than pondering, what else should I acquire? The mind starts to inquire, What merits my attention? This sensation is luxurious because genuine presence has become increasingly scarce. In a fragmented world, having sufficient mental space to fully savor a meal, a journey, a friendship, or even a mundane afternoon represents a significant form of abundance. The greatest privilege may not stem from having every choice available, but from the willingness to genuinely connect with the opportunities that already exist.
As we approach the conclusion, I wish to examine what becomes less burdensome when this viewpoint is authentically embraced rather than merely comprehended. Numerous philosophical concepts appear intriguing in dialogue, but only disclose their significance when they subtly transform everyday experiences. If an individual gradually shifts from evaluating success based on ownership to assessing it through meaningful access, what internal changes might occur? Which unseen weights could gradually lift? Furthermore, what type of relationship with time, identity, ambition, and daily life could emerge when the objective shifts from acquiring everything to staying connected to what genuinely holds significance?
The initial aspect that lightens is comparison. Much of comparison arises from tangible possessions, as they are straightforward to quantify. Access, however, is a different matter. It is profoundly personal. No one else can entirely assess the depth of your conversations, the caliber of your attention, the trust embedded in your relationships, or the freedom present in your schedule. Subsequently, ambition starts to transform. It does not vanish, but it shifts from being driven by accumulation to being guided by alignment. Instead of inquiring, how can I acquire more? We subtly ponder, how can I stay connected to what truly enriches my life? Time also takes on a different quality. It becomes less fragmented as fewer resources are devoted to sustaining identities centered around possessions. There is increased space to observe, to reflect, and to pause before responding. Even uncertainty loses some of its intimidation. When confidence stems from adaptability rather than ownership, change no longer feels like a total loss. Instead, it becomes an opportunity to explore new avenues of access, new relationships, and new possibilities. In the end, I believe this is where intangible luxury reveals itself. It is not the absence of material comfort, nor is it a denial of ownership. It is the quiet assurance that your life remains abundant because your greatest wealth resides in your capacity to engage with the world, not because you can own every aspect of it, but because you can meaningfully access what truly matters when the moment demands it.
As we conclude this discussion, I wish to leave the audience with a final reflection rather than a definitive conclusion. We have explored themes of ownership, access, freedom, and the unseen framework of a meaningful existence. However, perhaps the most crucial inquiry is not about the quantity of ownership one possesses, but rather whether their lifestyle enables them to maintain a true connection to what imparts significance to life. If a listener were to finish today and take a moment to sit in silence with a single thought, not as a goal to attain, but as a gentle consideration to carry into the next day, what would you wish for them to remember? What subtle question or insight do you believe merits revisiting long after this dialogue has concluded?
I hope they depart with the understanding that life does not require us to possess everything it presents. In contemporary society, there exists a subtle pressure to accept that a meaningful existence must be accumulated gradually, that every opportunity should transform into an acquisition, every interest a commitment, and every success something we retain indefinitely. However, it is possible that life was never intended to be born in such a manner. Consider the moments that resonate with us most profoundly. A conversation that shifted our viewpoint. A landscape that rendered us speechless. A book that appeared at precisely the right moment. A friendship founded on trust. None of these gained significance because we owned them. They became significant because we were entirely present when they were offered to us. Perhaps abundance is less about augmenting what we possess, and more about enhancing our ability to embrace what each phase of life presents. Thus, the question I would carry forward is not, what else do I need to possess? But rather, what is already within my grasp that I have not genuinely experienced? At times, the most fulfilling life is not the one with the largest collection of possessions, but rather the one characterized by the greatest openness. The individual who lives well is often not surrounded by the most belongings, but by meaningful access to wisdom, to beauty, to relationships, to tranquility, to purpose, and to moments that cannot be stored, only experienced. If this contemplation lingers with someone, perhaps they will start to realize that the truest form of luxury is not about having more of life under their command. It is about becoming more fully available to life itself.
It is conceivable that luxury has never been characterized by the broadening of ownership limits, but instead by the improvement of our capacity to maneuver through life. There exists a subtle freedom in recognizing that not all meaningful experiences need to be owned by us to enrich our lives. A conversation can transform us without being our own. A location can rejuvenate us, even if it does not bear our name. Knowledge can influence us without occupying space on our bookshelves. Perhaps the most fulfilling life is not the one that accumulates the most possessions, but the one that remains receptive to what is genuinely significant. As you conclude this discussion, consider asking yourself, am I dedicating my life to acquiring experiences, or am I evolving into a person who is entirely open to receiving them? At times, the truest form of freedom is not found in ownership, but in the effortless access to a life that continually welcomes your presence.